So we're here to talk through this hex Tapa. I think the difficulty comes both from the unfamiliarity of the hexagonal grid and really the effect of the no three hexagons at a point shading rule being a little different than the 2x2 rule, and actually a little more forcing than the normal 2x2 rule. One of the things we can do right at the start is recognize a lot of places where there are clues that are only ones. Those are cells that are going to have to come into and out of the clue pretty quickly. Cells like this, if they were shaded, would X off all of these four, and you'd isolate that cell. So this isn't used. There are 6 cells around a hexagon, so a 1-1-1 clue is a forced clue. It will look kind of like this symbol, either these bottom 2 in the top or the top 2 in the bottom will be used. One thing I found helpful in this puzzle in general is every time I shade one hexagon in a group of 3, I know that one of the remaining 2 cells is unused, and around a clue like this 5, knowing that one of those is unused, we can shade the other 4. That simply now tells us one of these cells is unused, which means around a 2-2. This is the equivalent of a 3-3 clue in a square Tapa puzzle. The other unused clue is exactly opposite it, and this top space and this bottom space will have to be shaded. We'll see pretty quickly that there's no way to get through this side for connectivity, so this region here has to get across the grid. Notice if these cells were used and these cells are unused, we sort of form a wall, and so we're going to isolate this in the corner. And to keep that isolation from happening, we have to use the top choice here, not the bottom choice. And I think it may be helpful, I'll actually mark a dark line for visibility for the Tapa space so we understand connectivity. This 1-2 clue has 4 cells left, and so it's going to use both of the extreme sides, so this and this. One of these gets used. Having shaded this cell, we mark off that X. That gives us all of this, actually. Here we have another case around this 2-2 clue of how to look at connectivity. If it uses just these 2 cells and this is unshaded, this bottom part will be fully unconnected. It can't get out. It'll have a wall like this that you can't get around. So this cell must be used. This cell must be used. It means these cells are not around this too. We'll come back to this section in a bit. I think the next place we can make some good progress is up on this side. This 1-2 clue also is a case where we have 4 cells left, so it's going to use the 2 extremes. This 1-1 clue has 3 cells, so it's actually fully specified. Using our technique of marking the unused cell off of this, we get this 2-2 clue with these as the unused options. These cells get shaded. Something that we should recognize in this corner around this 1-3 clue is that the 3 section is going to come off of this cell. We actually have 2 scenarios down below, but I want you to look at this one for the moment. Notice this 3 can come across but then not get down, or can come down but can't get across. So in this scenario, this cell, to get out, has to use these 2 cells, and that would create not just 1-3, but another multi-cell clue here. And so there's a counterfactual, but it comes from connectivity, which is if this top cell of these 2 is unshaded, the cell gets isolated. And to keep things well connected, we need to have a route for this more directly to get out, whether it's up or down. We don't know, but it's defined there. We'll now get to a scenario where we really need to think about connectivity around this space. And one of the first places to start is to see that we can only use at most one of these cells, so one of these will be unused, which means the passage has to come through this cell, however it goes specifically. This 1-3 clue with the cell unmarked has to use these extremes. The third cell can be here or here, but this is known for sure. That actually marks off this space, so now we have a 1-2 clue that has just one way to fill it out. And we're going to need to get in and out of this space, so if we actually mark off the unusable spots, this is the way this one gets fulfilled. This clue comes up here. Marking some more of our notation as we've been doing things. The next helpful case is probably to think about connectivity around this cell. The reason I'm interested in looking there is in part I have a big blocker on this side that's going to be tough to get around, and if I take the option where this cell and this cell are unused, I end up getting a case where I hit wall, wall, wall in all scenarios. So these get shaded. I still have to get out and around this area, which could be a little tricky, but we're going to see exactly how that option comes together. It looks like one helpful place to mark is off of this one clue. Notice this 4 will have some kind of wide wrap, but it's not going to use both of these cells. Once we mark there's an edge off one of these, it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice these 2 cells are used in any of the scenarios. That actually gives us this shape. Also gives us the cells unused, which finishes out the 4 for us. And actually also finishes out this 1 for us. We now get a lot of the 4 defined, get some of the 3 defined. The cell unused gives us the rest of the 1, 1, 1. There's another tricky deduction. At the start of the puzzle we saw these 2 cells and how this middle spot couldn't work. Let's actually consider shading this cell. That will set these as unusable, but notice by making these 2 connected, either of these cells would form a 3 shaded hexagon triangle, which is not allowed. So you can propagate after getting this one to the adjacent 1, 1, 1 clue and see these cells work out. Let's again mark our x1 off of a shaded cell and see how this 2, 2, 2, or sorry, this 2, 2 clue looks like this. We have a few places where now it looks like uniqueness is gonna, like these cells being shaded is gonna have to come together from uniqueness, but let's get to it logically by just getting a little farther and solve. Connectivity looks like it's going to play a role in getting this to come, so let's look at this right edge of the grid and think about connectivity. And it looks like this cell is, these 2 cells are some of the more interesting ones. If this cell comes immediately down, we mark off both of these and we mark off this top one and we fully isolate that grid, so we can fill out the 2, 2 clue by thinking about connectivity this way. And again, as we said at the start, one of the reasons this hex Tapa may be harder is that a lot of these triangle eliminations aren't obvious, but once you form even like a straight line of this, you just eliminate so much around the line, including both of the escape opportunities. So it really closes off options quite fast. We need to get these cells around the grid. That will require coming like this. And then this extends. So we're seeing how we have just one outlet for these cells. Let's come down to the bottom here. The cell has to get out, so it has to use this. As before with a 4 clue, let's mark off this unused space. We have 1, 2, cells that must be used. We have to get out from the space, and if these are the cells that are unused and it comes like this, it's going to get isolated. If the cells come this way, that's okay, but it looks like this one isn't shaded, so at least this cell is shaded. This has to come out, so this cell gets shaded. So we have all of this done. We're now in a scenario where this has to be able to get out. So these get shaded. This has to complete this 1-1 clue. You still need to have connectivity, so these come together like this. This comes together like this. So we now have one key point there, one key point here. If we actually look back at the grid, we'll see that we also have this is an isolated group that needs to connect in. So the next thing to think about is this whole space, and so this has to connect out further, and you can say, well, it's going to use one of these two cells to finish the 3. Here's another case where just if we like grab a cell, it quickly closes off everything around it. This because of the no 3 hexagons together at a point rule, and this because of the rest of the Tapa clue. And so it's this kind of look ahead where you really have to see that some paths are very bad in a hex Tapa and some paths are very efficient in a hex Tapa. And it's almost always the efficient paths. A lot of these things that have this kind of triangle shape and these 120-degree turns that get used. So we get this for connectivity up to here. We have to finish out the puzzle. And I think the last space that's critical to consider is this 2-2 clue. And here again, it's going to be something like the eliminations that come from different uses of the clue. I think the specific issue is with these cells. If I shade here, I get to a case where I fully blocked off this part of the grid, and this end of the Tapa can't come to the rest of the Tapa. And how would we see that in general? Well, we know we have to get across from the right side to the left side. And so we sort of have this cell to do it, but it needs to also come down here, so this isn't enough. This cell is required. It's actually a choke point. Actually, I have an X. It's not in the grid. That's the issue. One of these cells is the choke point. And what we saw is that if we shade these cells, you fill this one in, but then this becomes unused. And so we have to get both through these cells, but also through these cells. And collectively, the only way to do that is like this. This has to connect with the left side of the grid, so these get shaded. This has to come up. We have to get a 2 clue around here, so that's going to have to use the space this way. This then actually limits everything around the 5. And the final cell here for the 1. So we got through this trickier form of a hex Tapa. It's actually a pretty nice rectangular grid shape that Serkan put together. A good use of these 1-1-1 clues to really force some connectivity. A lot of different ways these 2-2 clues had options that, while there are 3 choices around them, you could really eliminate 2 of those 3 and get specific answers for them. And then a whole lot of places, the reason this is the hardest in the Saturday puzzles, a whole lot of places where there's a little bit of look ahead, but a lot of cancellation. So we saw, for instance, here where coming out this way would block off the whole rest of the grid. Coming up here going this way would block off the left side of the grid from the right side of the grid. So a lot of this kind of look ahead, also we saw it over here, coming vertically would block off this whole group. A lot of this little bit of look ahead to see how the anti-3 hexagons touching at a point rule will cause challenges for the Tapa to stay connected. And so while you may not solve a ton of these hex Tapa puzzles, we think that to certainly see how to solve this one and future ones that we may be posting on the site, hopefully you got a little bit of the sense of how to use that anti-3 touching at a point rule to its maximal effect, particularly in looking ahead for connectivity. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.